And if you could just say your name and then your county of residence, please.
Cool. My name is David Hayes, live in Knox County. So just to bring into the space like where I'm coming from and where a lot of people in the community are coming from, like I'm not smiling, I'm not laughing. I just want to be real about what we're talking about here. So this is from an article I just found on the internet about Dustin Seal. So 2 years after he was, this is an article about Dustin Seal. So 2 years after he was expelled from high school over a knife a friend had put in his car, Dustin Seal was asked to list what he missed most about his expulsion. What he missed most after his expulsion. Homecoming, prom, graduation, his friend, math class, band scholarship, marching. 2 years after making the list, he climbed into his bathtub and shot himself. These are real consequences we're talking about on so many levels. So I just want y'all to I just want everybody to acknowledge that. So going into some more specific things into these recommendations. Looking at number 2 and 3, right, talking about the steering committee, the oversight committee, and the ombudsman, just make note that these needs to be as independent as possible and away from the bureaucracy in the school system, because actually when the school system is part of the problem, you need people who can actually give an accurate reflection of like what's going on from the community's perspective and not necessarily be tied to the bureaucracy under a superintendent. Looking at 1.1, cultural competency. So the definition for cultural competency is as follows from the glossary. The ability to interact with others based on understanding, acceptance, and respect for cultural differences. Yeah, that's great, but we're also missing a key point of like implicit bias in teachers, right? If we don't talk about the implicit biases that teachers have and the prejudices that our teachers have, if you don't even try to cover that and combat that, and then a lot of us really don't see how we're going to see any sort of drop in push out in schools and people getting arrested and suspended just by having cultural sort of conversations. Looking at 1.4, talking about training cops. A lot of things I've been hearing is talking about how people want less cops, not trained cops, less cops, and more counselors, social workers, people like PBIS staff. You know, that's where folks are really wanting to see growth in our in our schools and those type of staff, and not necessarily like in cops. And we don't want to see money being put into training cops when actually they're still going to be there arresting folks. So more of an emphasis on, even the cops got to be in the school, how can we take away the cops' interaction from our students as much as possible. 2.4, about developing and implementing a student advisory council. It looks like a lot of the burden on this is on the student rep. That's just a lot of work, I think, especially the task force. You have a task force full of like people who a lot of NGOs and nonprofits, a lot of mentoring programs and everything that have bases of youth that are already activated and moving in their community. So it seems to be a miss if you don't take advantage of like the resources of people within the task force and the groups you're already working with to do something like building a student advisory council and not necessarily putting the work, a lot of the work on the student rep, which Sydney is great, but a whole student council, a whole student advisory board, that's just a lot to do. 2.5, talking about the mentoring. Mentoring is also can be a great thing, but also I want to put more emphasis on it being accessible. Not necessarily just to the talented 10th grade students, but actually looking more like the students who are struggling and actually need that more. A lot of times the programs is kind of a thing where like some students get in, some students can't, and we all know usually the more privileged students can get access to a sort of programs. We want to make sure the students who aren't with the privileges, who don't have the privileges, who actually the most in need of these services, get them. 3.1 to 3.4, that's actually, I think that's the meat of it right here. I think those are like the most crucial things, because we really do need to have a shift away from the punitive side of discipline. A lot of y'all familiar, y'all been going to Stop the Violence panels, been like seeing all this stuff, especially since Zay's died and Zay's cousin and Alan, and all these folks dying. I think school push-out has a direct implication into this violence we see in our streets. Direct implication, you can't deny it. So I think y'all do have a role to play in this and changing our discipline from a more punitive style to a more restorative justice style, more positive behavior model, and changing the whole code where it's not traumatizing for students. Is a big step, and I think that will have direct correlations to things that happen in our streets. Conduct, prejudicial to good order and disorderly conduct, both of them need to be eliminated as reasons for suspensions and arrests, not just flip-flopping the two. Disappointing to see that there's no curriculum no sort of things about the curriculum mentioned in here. And I would say if y'all are serious about this, you need to put the money behind it.
Thank you.